Today's video is brought to you by Card Kingdom, and you can pre-order all the Double Masters cards you need now over at cardkingdom.com. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Double Master spoilers, and we have some great cards to talk about today. Some legitimately chase awesome reprints that are a pretty big deal, so we should probably jump right into it, start talking about sweet new Double Masters cards. So first up today, we have what might be the single most important reprint in the set, at least top 5, top 3, and that is Force of Will returning. So Force of Will, the free counter spell that has been one of the most important cards in Legacy for a long time, also sees a lot of play in Commander, like a top 20 blue card in Commander. So we're getting back Force of Will, which is currently $120, down to $115 for the reprint. So it'll be interesting to see where the price lands. So getting it back along with what I'm sure will be an incredibly expensive box topper, a mythic box topper, but still a super sweet box topper art. So Force of Will, I don't really know what to say about this card. It's not one of those cards where you can go through a list of decks that play it, because in the formats where it's legal, like Legacy, like Vintage, and even Commander to some extent, the answer is every deck plays it. It's one of the most played cards in Legacy, close to like 50% of decks, along with Brainstorm to Ponder. Shows up in Vintage all the time, shows up in a lot of blue Commander decks. I think it's one of the 20-ish most played cards in blue in the Commander format. So I think the big deal with Force of Will is the price. Last time Force of Will was reprinted, the reprinted version went down to like $80. It's currently like $125, I think, pre-reprint. So that's a decent discount, although make sure to check the other versions, because apparently like the original Alliances version went down even more. So hopefully this will be a chance for Commander players and Legacy players to pick up Force of Wills they need. It's some amount of a discount, although Force of Will, it's always going to be expensive, and this is a card that's going to increase in price again. It might get down to 80, maybe it gets a little lower than that for some printings, but give it a couple of years and it'll be right back up over $100. We also got a card that I didn't actually realize how expensive it was. Hammer of Nazahn. So Hammer, very powerful Commander equipment, shows up in a lot of Commander decks. Obviously, it combos with its signature Commander, but equipping for free is nice, giving creature indestructible. That's what Commander decks want to do to fight through removal and Wrath. I didn't realize that this card was like $30-something, which is ridiculous. So this is actually a really high value reprint, and it shows up in basically any equipment-based Commander deck, especially when Nazahn Revered Blacksmith. You will always play Nazahn with his hammer, but really like Akiri decks, Godo decks, almost any equipment-based Commander deck, especially one where you care about your Commander living, like Godo or Akiri, where you're trying to like one-shot your opponent, combo off with your Commander, really values Hammer of Nazahn. So definitely a super powerful effect, and definitely a good reprint, mostly priced-wise, but this is going to make copies much more accessible. It was only printed once in a Commander deck, which is a few years old now, so it should really drop down the price, showing up at rare in a normal set, making it a boon for Commander players everywhere. We also got maybe one of the best modern reprints from the set in Walking Ballista. In Walking Ballista, you probably knows what it does, pings everything down, powerful X spell. We just got a pseudo reprint in Secret Lair with cool new art, so no box topper Walking Ballista, presumably kind of replaced by the Secret Art robot transformer version. But Walking Ballista, it's an ultra staple in Pioneer and Modern. It's mostly played as an infinite mana payoff or infinite combo piece. So Pioneer, one of the top decks in the format, the infinite Heliod combo. You give your Walking Ballista lifelink with Heliod, then you can ping something, Heliod replenishes a counter, you can ping again, infinite damage. It shows up as an infinite damage payoff for the Devoted Druid Vizier of Remedies combo in Modern. Also shows up fairly in some decks like Eldrazi-tron. And the same thing is true of the Commander format, where if you're making infinite mana in basically any format, Walking Ballista is probably the best payoff, because unlike other infinite mana payoffs, Walking Ballista can always just be run out as a normal creature. You can find it with creature tutors, you can find it with artifact tutors, so there's a lot of upside to Walking Ballista being your infinite mana payoff. So if you're going infinite with something like Kinnan, Walking Ballista probably going to be in your deck is one of the ways to kill your opponent, and Walking Ballista is still very expensive. Even despite the Secret Lair reprinting, it's still like a $25 card, so definitely a rare you're going to be excited to open in your pack, worth more than the cost of a pack, and it's still going to be a really awesome open and hopefully make the card a bit more accessible for players in Modern and also Commander to a lesser extent. We also got Wizards. Geist of St. Traft. So, Geist of St. Traft, coming back at Mythic, it is a powerful card. I guess it's a semi-iconic card. But one thing Geist of St. Traft is not is a valuable card. We finally got our Tree of Redemption. And yes, I know, Geist of St. Traft, it's way better than Tree of Redemption. So that's a little bit facetious. But really, when we've talked about bad Mythics so far, we've been talking about Vengevines, Reyas, Arcums, which were all cards that were at least worth the price of a double Masters pack when they were reprinted, in the like $15 range. Geist of St. Traft is like a $5 Mythic, and it's been reprinted in like a dual deck. It's only $3.70. So even though it is a sweet card, it is just not a card you want to open as a Mythic in a $15 booster. That's going to be the card that you're going to be so disappointed, because you know you got lucky enough to open a Mythic, and it could have been a Jace, it could have been a Mana Crypt, it could have been a Force of Will, something ridiculously expensive, and instead you get just like a complete dud, and that increases the variance a little more. So far, we hadn't had any truly dud Mythics in the set, but Geist of St. Traft is the first. That said, I mean, it is a good card that you're going to play with potentially in Spirit decks sometimes, maybe in some Commander decks. Doesn't see a ton of play right now, but definitely not there value-wise for a Mythic. On the other hand, if Wizards really had to reprint Geist of St. Traft, which I don't think they did, because it's a card they've already put in like dual decks, but if they really felt like it, it probably did have to be Mythic because of Limited. I know that's an overused justification, but if you've ever played against Geist of St. Traft, it is super annoying in Limited. It has hexproof, it's cheap, it attacks for 6 essentially because of the Angel that it makes, so it is a ridiculously overpowered card in Limited. I would have preferred Wizards just not to reprint it in the set, because it's not valuable enough for anyone to care about. It's not like we need a reprint to get the price down or anything, so I would have rather them just hold off on Geist of St. Traft and reprint something else. But if they do feel like they have to, it basically has to be at Mythic, because it would ruin Limited otherwise. We also got the return of Chrome Mox. Not all the Mythics have been bad. Actually, I know, little complaint about Geist of St. Traft aside, we actually got some insane Mythics today. We talked about Force of Will being a $100 card. Chrome Mox is actually a really expensive card as well, up to $70. We do have a normal version too. It was spoiled in another language, so we don't actually have the mock-up of it, but coming in normal sets as a Mythic, along with a Mythic box topper. So Chrome Mox is he's playing two places. One is Storm decks in older formats, like Legacy, Vintage to some extent. Also, it's a CEDH staple. We've talked about this difference a couple of times through our spoiler videos, but if you are playing kill people as fast as possible CEDH type decks, Chrome Mox goes way up in value. Sure, you're going down a card, but if you're just going to combo kill your opponent anyway, it's definitely worth it to get that extra mana, and it gives you your explosive starts where you just like dump your hand on turn 1, and then like Windfall, Wheel of Fortune, something like that to refuel. So if you're playing a competitive EDH deck, I think Chrome Mox goes way up in value, and that is actually why it got so expensive. It was part of the CEDH price spike / buyouts a few months ago. It was reprinted in a master set, Eternal Masters, not that long ago, and it was as low as like $15 for quite a while, but then it slowly started increasing, and then with the CEDH price spikes, shot way up to $70, which means it's actually a pretty exciting reprint that has a lot of value, and the super sweet box topper art, nice bonus as well. Next on our list, we got another Commander All-Star at Mythic in Land Tax. And Land Tax currently at the $40-ish price range, and this is a card that sees a ton of play in white decks in Commander, essentially letting you draw 3 cards, although they're going to be basic lands, each turn as long as at least one opponent has more lands than you. So Land Tax, it is a powerful card. It gets better with like fetch lands, other shuffle shenanigans, scroll racks, so you can put the lands back and turn them into real cards. So there are synergies to make it even more powerful. However, the big deal is white is just really bad at drawing cards, and I know Wizards is trying to increase it. We saw Mingara, and it's heading in the right direction, but at this point in Commander, white's biggest issue is it's still really bad at card advantage compared to everyone else, which means, as a result, Land Tax, even though it's kind of weird, janky roundabout card advantage that is only basic lands, is still a staple of white decks, because you're just so desperate for anything that puts more cards in your hand. Your Megara, your Heliod, your Avacyn, essentially any mono white deck is going to play it. So Land Tax, expensive, very powerful, getting different art. I think this was Moto art, definitely not the original art. So definitely a sweet reprint, going to bring down the cost of white Commander decks a little bit, and a card you're going to want in your collection. This is another one that, especially bringing being printed at Mythic, I expect the price to come down, but then probably go back up, because we've seen that time and time again with cards that are like Ultra Staples and Commander. Sure, the price decreases for a while, but so many people are buying Commander decks, the price is going to increase eventually. So if Latex gets down, $25, $20, something like that, I would be very tempted to pick up the copies I need for my Commander decks, knowing that 5 years in the future, 2 years in the future, I'm probably going to have to pay way, way more if I wait. We also got some what I would consider mid-range rares. Aether's Canonist, there was a time when it was actually a playable hate card in artifact-based decks. That's kind of the trick of it. Each player casts a non-artifact spell, can't cast an additional non-artifact spell. So if you're playing all artifacts, maybe in affinity with Mox Opals and so forth, Aether's Canonist is great. You hurt your opponents a lot, you shut down Storm-style combo decks, and it doesn't really bother you because you're playing almost all artifacts anyway. On the other hand, because Mox Opal was bad, and Infinity's not really deck anymore, Aether's Canonist just doesn't really have a home in any format right now. Still in the like $5-6 range, something like that. Will definitely come down a ton with reprinting, so a card that I'm glad is going to be cheaper, but doesn't really have a solid home in any format at the moment. We also got Heartbeat of Spring, which is kind of along the same line, still worth a few dollars, originally from Kamigawa, one of the fair mana doublers, where technically you are doubling up the mana. The problem is you're doubling up everyone's mana, which means because you're helping your opponents, and since it's sorcery speed, you're theoretically helping your opponents first. This mostly at this point is just a group hug card for Commander decks. So if you're playing group hug, you're like, I'll double everyone's mana, hopefully they don't kill me with all the extra mana I give them. I'm the, the good guy that's giving them all extra cards and so forth. So that's the main hope of Heartbeat of Spring at this point. Doesn't see a ton of play in any archetype. There are some like really janky modern combos where you can like try to untap your lands a bunch of times to make a ton of mana, but those decks aren't really that good either. Still, definitely a card that could use a reprinting. It is worth a few bucks, and it's going to be close to bulk now that it's returning at Double Masters. We also got a couple of other decent Commander equipment. Basilisk Collar, Masterwork of Ingenuity, cards that you will definitely play in your Commander deck. The combination of Death Touch and Lifelink, I like playing Basilisk Collar, is one of my incidental life gain effects. Obviously works even better if you have pingers, walking ballista, some way to deal damage to creatures so you can just snipe them down with 1 damage, but it is a card that is definitely worth playing in Commander decks. And then Masterwork of Ingenuity is essentially a clone, but it only clones other equipment. However, it's just 1 mana, so it's super cheap. You can find it with your Stoneforge or any of your equipment-y commanders. So both at the like $5-6 range, definitely a reasonable reprints for Commander players primarily. We also got Greater Good, which is another card that is great in Commander. If there's anything I love in Commander, it's drawing tons of cards, and sacrificing creatures to draw cards, definitely worth it in my opinion. You can draw a ton of cards with a Greater Good, and it went up in price a bit recently thanks to Ominous Seas, which is essentially just a 2-card combo, because once you sacrifice a Kraken, you're going to draw 8 cards, which is with your Greater Good. You gotta discard 3, but whatever, you're still plus 5 cards. And that's going to put 8 counters back on the Ominous Seas. So then you do it again, you can sack the Kraken, draw 8 cards, discard 3, end up plus 5 cards, make another Kraken, essentially just draw your deck, and then you can win with Thassa's Oracle, or however you want to win. So that made Greater Good shoot up in price a little bit. It's not super expensive still the like $8 range, but that's one of those cards that if Wizards didn't keep reprinting it, it sees a lot of play in Commander, gonna keep going up, so this is gonna head off any future price increases. Drop the price a bit, let you get your copies, combo off of your Ominous Seas, have lots of fun in your Commander deck. We also got Reshape, which is a card that was a lot more exciting a few years ago. So Reshape, 2 mana plus X, sack an artifact, search for an artifact with converted mana cost X or less. So this was a card that was a staple of Eggs decks a few years ago. Carrot-Clad Ironworks, Second Sunrise, both ended up getting banned, which kind of pushed Eggs out of the format. And combine that with War of Invention being printed, which is very similar to Reshape, except you don't have to sacrifice an artifact, and you can tap your artifacts to pay for it. Reshape has kind of went from seeing a lot of play in Modern to seeing not really much play at all in Modern, because we got a better version and the decks it's best in has been banned. Still worth a few bucks, but I think that's mostly because it's really old from the original Mirrodin block, doesn't have much supply, and this should definitely get the price a lot cheaper if you want it for an artifact based Commander deck or something. We also got a downgrade in Jhoira Weatherlight Captain. So Jhoira, not a super expensive card, a fairly recent card, but it was a mythic in Dominaria. It is a pretty fun commander. Draws lots of cards. I mean, what more could you want? The big news is it was downgraded to rare for Double Masters, which I think is definitely good news. Would be a pretty disappointing mythic with its value, like a Geist of St. Traft level mythic. But at rare, it'll be fun and limited. Cast your legends, draw some cards, maybe build a commander deck around it. As far as lower rarity stuff, the big one today, Manamorphose, $10 range, free spell that is dominated modern in various decks. It does nothing, but it actually kind of does everything in a lot of decks, which makes it very powerful and fairly expensive, even though it's been reprinted a couple times, especially for an uncommon. Cranioplating, not super expensive. Affinity's not much of a thing anymore, but still worth a couple of bucks, and does occasionally show up in artifact-based commander decks, as well as affinity in older formats. And then we have a pretty big list of bulk level rares today. So when I say bulk rares, some of them are worth a couple of dollars, like Well of Ideas, I think is a couple bucks. Braids might be $3. But most of these are dollar level rares, and especially once we get the set of Double Masters and people are opening them, there's going to be a ton of these in circulation. So the price is going to drop even more. As far as playability, Kemba, pretty sweet commander if you want to make cats and play an equipment deck. Master of Ethereum, used to see playing Affinity. Affinity is not much of a thing anymore. Mirror Battlesphere can be a good commander finisher for artifact-based decks. Thragtusk, I really love, was just reprinted in Jumpstart, so there's a million copies now. But if you want to go blink action, Thragtusk is a great option. Braid's kind of a weird commander, a risky cult favorite commander where you let everyone put stuff into play for free. Hard to build a deck around, but if you want to do something just wacky and different, it is something fun to play once in a while. And Grand Architect, there have been weird modern decks built around Grand Architect where you would play cheap blue creatures and then use the ability of Grand Architect to tap blue creatures to add 2 mana for artifacts to like rush out Wormcoil engines and so forth. But those decks have kind of fallen off in popularity. It was a couple years ago that they were kind of popular. So these are cards, I mean, there's always bulk rares in sets, but really these are the cards that you're hoping not to open in your rare slot, mostly for value purposes, but still, it's going to make sure they're super cheap on the secondary market. So if you do want them, you're going to be able to get singles for pennies on the dollar. Although none of them were super expensive pre-Double Masters, they will go down a little bit, so get a bit of a discount there. As for our price update, today we're just going to pull up the spreadsheet and actually look at the spreadsheet itself. It will be linked in the description if you want to take a look at it. So average mythic value, $33.57, right about where it was yesterday, although the median value has come down a little bit. Average rare value trending down thanks to the big list of bulk rares we were talking about, knocking down prices. Under $5, it was up to like $5.65 or something. So not any massive changes. I guess the good news is we got some really good mythics today. The Force of Wills, the Chrome Moxes, so forth. We also got the Geist of St. Traft, which kind of evened out the Force of Will value. We do see prices continuing to mostly decline across the board. Mana Crypt actually ticked back up a little bit, but it's down under $100. But most cards are still trending down at Mythic and for the rare slot as well. So that brings us to the end of week 1. That means as far as the actual value, expected value, I think the value's looking pretty decent right now when you add everything together. We're a little bit over halfway through the set. Right now, if we assumed every other card in the set was worth $0 and that foils did not exist, box toppers did not exist, at current prices, a pack would get you about $10 in value. So obviously that's less than 15. However, that's assuming 40% of the mythics don't exist and 50% of the rares don't exist. Right now, if we assume that the prices from today carried over through the rest of those cards, the pack EV would be over $17. And again, that's without foils. That's not including box toppers. And that's not including some lower rarity stuff. $7 Manamorphoses, Mishra's Bauble, the Urza's Lands, Expedition Map at Common. So 1 week into Double Master spoiler season, value's looking good, although still going to be high risk. If you look at these rares, how many of these rares do you really want to open in a $15 pack? Like Exploration, Okay, that's good. Noble Hierarch, Cyclonic Rift. That's 3. Academy Ruins, it's dropping, but that's still a good open. Hammer of Nazahn is good. Walking Ballista is good. But really, that's like 6 rares out of the 60-ish that we've seen so far. So the rares that you really want to open are going to be few and far between. So I think that what's going to happen is, as you open this set, you're really going to be praying for mythics, and praying a little bit that you don't hit the Geist of St. Traft, or like Brea to a lesser extent, although Brea is still a good card. So you're really going to be hoping to hit mythics, and you're really going to be hoping to get lucky with your rares, but I think that when all is said and done, the bulk rare rate is going to be pretty high, and there's going to just be an insane amount of variance. So if you crack open a few boxes of Double Masters, I think you're going to come out pretty far ahead in value. On the other hand, if you just crack a box, or definitely just crack a pack, you're going to open packs that have close to 0 value. You're going to open a Thought Reflection and a Magus of the Abyss, along with a couple of common foils, and you basically got $0 out of your $15 pack. On the other hand, there are also going to be packs where you get a Mana Crypt and a Exploration or something, or someone's going to get a Force of Will Mana Crypt pack, and you're going to spend $50 and get $200, but the variance is going to be incredibly high. So keep that in mind as you're deciding over the weekend about your pre-orders and so forth. The value is looking solid, but variance is looking very, very high. And the best news, though, as we talked about, is singles are getting way cheaper. So I think for many players, especially if you're thinking about getting one box or a few packs, you're most likely going to be better off taking advantage of cheap reprinted singles for your commander decks, putting together modern decks, whatever, taking advantage of these price drops compared to risking everything on a box where, sure, maybe you double your money, but you also might lose most of your money. So the safer plan for sure for most players is just to avoid that variance and pick up the singles. But anyway, that brings us to the end of our Double Master spoilers for today. So what do you think? How excited are you for the return of Force of Will, for Crowbox, for Land Tax, or Geist of St. Traft? What about the rares? Are there anything in there that interests you? Let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll be back next week to talk about more Double Master spoilers. And also, on Monday, we have our exclusive MTG Goldfish preview, so keep it out for that as well. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy it, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.